Good Australian morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matthew Cox, and we're here today for the Audio Jungle webinar. Thanks all for joining us. Can I just get a quick show of hands before we start? And Slack starts buzzing at me. Can everybody please let me know whether or not they can hear us? You'll see a little chat box along the side, and just punch in your answer into that. Hi, dear Envato. Clear and loud, everyone's coming in, sounds good. Can my beautiful attendees please introduce themselves? My beautiful panelists rather introduce themselves today. Leading the show, we have the Mr. Adrian Gardner, who will introduce us to everybody.
Hey everybody, for those who don't know me, my name is Adrian. I'm the Quality Media Specialist for Audio Jungle, and it's my pleasure to speak to you guys today. Joining us are Audio Jungle reviewer Matthew Pablo.
Hello.
We have authors extraordinaire Yusu Kim, better known as Sun Channel Music, and the very famous Adi Goldstein, otherwise known as AG Soundtracks. And we have Envato.
Yeah. Hold on for 2 seconds, guys. I'm just going to get the recording set up and working. Uno momento. Here we go. We're going to start recording as of now, and we can edit it later. 2 seconds. Boom. Hold on, and we're good. Alrighty. One of the favorite things that I like to do before we kick off these webinars, and we've done a few of them with Envato, is just to get a quick indication of where everybody is from, because I like to get an idea of like how many different countries are joining us, and it really gives you kind of an awesome idea as to the scope of where all of Envato's attendees are from. Can everyone just let me know where they're coming from, where they're joining us from today? We've got one person from Ukraine, we've got one person from Russia, lots of Stockholm, Sweden, Arizona, USA. I was there the other day. USA, Miami, Florida, Barcelona, Romania, Ukraine, Montana, USA, Hamburg, Germany, beautiful city. I've been there before. Ireland, Argentina, Arizona, Portugal, Ukraine, USA, Spain, Portland, Las Vegas, Netherlands, Holland. Wow, it's an absolutely amazing list of places. Alrighty, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself scarce, and you're going to be hearing almost predominantly from our beautiful panel, who's going to be talking to you today about the reality behind rejections and how to reduce them. You will see and hear very little of me until the end, unless I feel I need to pop my head in. But Adrian, I'm going to get you to take it away. So I'm going to mute myself.
So here we are. We're just waiting for Matt to share his screen, I guess, in full screen. And we can get started. A lot of you are authors, we imagine, and we just wanted to take the opportunity to have this discussion, which is sort of first of maybe many for other markets in general, just to discuss a number of topics which have to do with the reality of rejections when inevitably some of the items that are submitted to us can't be accepted for a variety of reasons. So we'll just get started, and if anybody has any questions, we may wait for Matthew to coordinate that, and we'll be happy to answer whatever we can. Otherwise, we'll just have a discussion about a number of the topics that are really important about this.
Just to chime in, Adrian, what we'll probably do, guys, is if all the attendees can save their questions for the very end, we'll put the questions to the panel at the conclusion. So don't stress too much if we don't get to your questions over the course of the webinar. We will endeavour to answer quite a few of them at the very conclusion. So stand by, and sorry for talking. Fire away.
All right, fire away, Matthew. You can jump into the next slide. So the topics of the day are pretty much, we're going to cover a number of things that are actually, we can go into depth with a lot of it, but we're going to go try and maintain a conversation and see what everybody can contribute. So most of the topics will include just some general rejection concepts. Then we're going to go through the reality of rejections from the author's point of view versus the reviewer's point of view. We're going to discuss some of the issues with hard versus soft rejections. How are those, how do those things happen to begin with? We'll go through some of the general music rejection reasons. We'll talk about the middle ground of rejections. We're going to talk a little about embracing and learning from failure. And then we won't forget about sound effects. So we'll talk about rejections for those which are a bit different. And just some general pre-submission tips that everybody can take on board, hopefully. And then we'll wrap it up with some of your questions.
Next slide.
Okay, so basically a good question to think about rejections is not just so much, it's not the end of the road. Rejections are a reality and we need to understand how they can help. And it's mostly about everyone thinking for themselves how they can help. So the first thing that an author really needs to think about before even submitting is what is it that you want to submit, meaning who do you want to submit for? Why are you submitting in the first place? And what is the result that ultimately you're expecting to get out of your experience with submitting and being an author at Audio Jungle? So we have the point, which is thinking like a customer, which is very important because you need to address the mindset of a customer before getting to the point where you're going to really have any kind of measure of, well, is this working or is this not? You want people to find your music in a positive way, or how do you want them to address when your music when they find it? Otherwise, we need to talk about arts versus commerce. And guys, if you have any thoughts on the matter, just chime in. This is a group discussion. We need to talk about arts versus commerce because the reality of the matter is this is a stock audio library, and we need to keep in mind that there's a place for art, but the vast majority, if not the bulk of our customers, are looking for music to fit a certain type of project or to support a visual. So in that sense, it's going to be it's a commercial angle to music, which is quite, predominant. And because there's so two traditionally diametrically opposed concepts, art versus commerce, we want to talk about building bridges between those two, which ultimately only leads to having a stronger portfolio to present to your customers and hopefully therefore getting better results.
Well, I'm excited.
Of course you are. Do we have any thoughts or comments so far?
From the panel?
Yeah, definitely. I think I want to add that, sometimes I see on the forums that sometimes people are a little bit frustrated because some of their items have been rejected for maybe not being commercial enough. And it has to ultimately be viewed as, music is this art form, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to license it to these people who need to use it for their business projects or whatever project it might be. So as much as I would like as an artist to make whatever I want, it has to be a consideration because that's what my end goal is with this type of music that I'm making. And I have other outlets as well where I'm not looking to just license my music. I have, my own personal projects where I can just do whatever I want and not have to worry about appeasing some video editor or whoever else who might be using my music in the end.
Yeah, to add to that, Audio Jungle, it's just one of those other outlets among other outlets that you would have as a musician. So don't think that it's your only outlet for your music. And I think sometimes that can attribute to some of those things that you've seen on the forum, Yusu. Because then growing as a musician, you learn to have all these different outlets, and you need to realize that there's a special Audio Jungle is for mainly commercial music, or it's like Adrian said, for visual counterpart. you know, it's not just for your entire portfolio, your life's work. So that's one of the first things you need to understand.
So, Adi, do you have anything to add, or would you like, or we can move on to the next slide?
Well, for me, it's kind of funny because when I started to upload music to Audio Jungle, I started to upload only my artistic music. I didn't know exactly what is all this market about. So I found out that lots of clients liked my artistic music, and so I continued to write. And then I figured out that if I would fit it more to the clients, I got more sales. So I think that the direction of my music composing had slightly changed since when I began to write the music to the libraries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good stuff, guys. I'll push on to the next slide.
Okay, so rejection, the experience of rejection. What do we can say? I mean, the picture says it all. I'm sure a number of people find the experience of rejection rather frustrating. The bottom line is rejection is something that is experienced in very different ways by authors, but it's also actually experienced by reviewers, because reviewers are the ones who have to make the decision. And it's not something that is just like, well, yes, no, maybe so. There's actual concentrated thought that has to go into the process. So as we move on, we're going to go through some of those points that distinguish or differentiate the experience of rejection and things that authors can be aware of, and understand also what reviewers have to be doing as a process in order to get to the point where they have to make the decision and then execute it.
Whoops, sorry guys.
No problem, Matthew.
I think he was too mesmerized by that graphic. Blew him away.
Mm-hmm. There we go. So do any of you gentlemen have any thoughts on the matter yourself? Or we can just discuss the points that are here. Basically, we have, just interrupt or wave your hand if there's anything. I think there's maybe a bit of a delay, but we'll do our best here. It's all about decisions, yes or no. On one side of the equation, we've got our authors, all of the authors who are ideally hoping to have a portfolio worth of the customer's attention. And the main things basically that really are, we have two sides. We have technical submission requirements, which is, truth be told, there are a lot of things that have to be kept in mind that get into the habit of uploading, whether it's watermarking or making previews and zipping, preparing your content basically and the correct formats. But we also have the importance of understanding the media target, which if it's not done if it's not really grasped, whereby music seems to not fit the mold of what the Audio Jungle library is looking for, pardon me, that can ultimately lead in a rejection, which is not to say that there's no merit to the music itself. It's a form of art in its own capacity. So that requires some objective self-appraisal, which we'll touch on a bit later in our chat. And Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say. And one rejection is not a portfolio's failure. 2 rejections, 3 rejections. It's everybody has a point in their career as an artist where they have to get to, and they're getting to. And some people join Audio Jungle earlier. Some people join Audio Jungle later. So in any sense of the word, patience and persistence will always be your friend. On the other side of the equation, you've got the reviewers processing the content, who have to be mindful of many degrees of library standards of quality, which are expected of them to measure in a sense. So that means that you have this joining of these two elements, which when you take it in the aggregate, because it's not just, okay, I'm going to listen to these 3 files, it's literally thousands and thousands of, submissions. And they need to be kind of addressed in a way that tries to maintain a sense of what is it that the customers are most needing, in a sense. So that brings us to the point of, I'm sure a lot of people have heard it or read it, is general commercial viability, which is something that we're going to touch on as we progress. But just to introduce it here, it's basically the ability for a piece of music to suit a wider variety of customers' needs without being too limited or too narrow. That's what general commercial viability is.
Would the panel like to chime in on that point of general commercial viability? Because I think it's something that we've got some authors here who've obviously done very, very, very well kind of fitting the peg into the hole of.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely start off with that. I think part of that also comes with self-appraisal, I feel like. The reason that we are uploading these tracks to Audio Jungle is for the hopes of many people licensing them. So you really have to have commercial viability in mind. And the true metric of successful commercial viability is if a lot of people are licensing them. So one of the things that I, for example, use for self-appraisal is I'll make a track that I think is great, and then I'll upload it. But in the end, you never know if people actually like it a lot or not. But sometimes if something does work, then you run with it. So I had this one song called Christmas Indie Dance, and I thought it was yeah. Anyway, I thought it was pretty cool, and I uploaded it, and it started doing well. It was one of my best sellers when I started a few months in, and I was like, what is going on with this track? Why are people liking this? So I thought it was the drums, and the drums were really cool, and then so I decided I'm going to make another song that has a similar drum feel, and then that ended up being this song that I wrote called Beach Chill Indie Rock, which has gone on to sell like 2,800 times or something. So I think having that self-appraisal and then knowing at that point what is working for you commercially in terms of viability is definitely important.
Mm. Yeah, right on. It was really interesting. When I was in LA recently, I met some authors in LA who are Audio Jungle authors, and they mentioned that their work, when they did client work externally to Audio Jungle, they said that it really helped shape their understanding of what clients' wants and needs are, and that really helped them take a better objective self-appraisal of their own work when submitting to Audio Jungle.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think writing for custom music or whatever else it might be, Audio Jungle has benefit in being recognizing what people are looking for in their projects.
Where the market is. Right on. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Okay. I wanted to say that commercial viability also kind of ties in with understanding the media target as one of the points over there. If you don't really understand, what you're making a track for, if you just go on Audio Jungle and you hear a bunch of bells and ukuleles and just think, okay, I'm just going to play ukulele and bells. I mean, you can do that, but it's not, you're kind of limiting yourself. You're not really thinking about, what could this be good for, before you start writing or before you start uploading a track. You have to think, would this be useful for a commercial? Yeah, it would be useful for, any type of commercial. That's great. So it has a general sort of viability. So I think, just to say, from what Yusu said, understanding the media and the commercial viability, that kind of ties in together.
Yeah, right on.
Ooh, this lag.
Any further chime? Cool, Adrian, shall we push on to the next slide?
As you wish, sir.
Your wish is my command. Very good. Welcome to the hard versus soft rejection slide. How quickly does that come across for you guys? It's lagging a little bit, is it?
It seems okay here. The transition is a little bit.
It's okay. We're just keeping the audience in relative suspense. That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
just really, delaying the gratification.
Well, it's
All right,
we are sort of improvising in the sense that we're musicians, so we're gonna carry on.
Yeah, there's a musical ebb and flow to this entire presentation.
We'll chip away at it and do the best we can. So hard versus soft rejections. Any author who's had a rejection or who's been around long enough to know the system knows that there is a sense of hard versus soft rejection, which is different. I'm not going to say it's absolutely unique because it's possible that it exists elsewhere, but it is very unique in the sense that it's not very common. From the beginning, the library itself, not just Audio Jungle, but the Envato markets have always, I would say, endeavored to help people learn when they can. The fact of the matter is, as and grown, and the queues, the team simply has to face the reality that if we wish to continue maintaining the possibility of allowing authors to upload and receiving any kind of feedback, we had to be able to scale it back and make it more efficient in terms of. There have been a number of internal observations and studies which we won't go into in depth because that would take all night and tomorrow. But basically, the points that really conclude in a reviewer's mind whether it's a hard rejection versus a soft rejection can be summed up to a degree simply enough. You can take that with a grain of salt, but this is how it goes. In order for it to have a track that generally gets hard rejected will need to have the ability to be justified, have three objective issues that need something to be worked on. And those can be any of the main points of a track structure, which is the composition, the arrangement, and the production. And for any newcomers or people who are still learning a bit about theory specifically, if an interesting way to liken it is to writing, storytelling, which is what writing music is to a large degree. So when you talk about composition, you're thinking about the words or the ideas themselves that you want to express. When you're talking about the arrangement of the music, you're thinking about, well, how are those words arranged into sentences or paragraphs? And the production is, well, how do you deliver that to the viewer so they can actually perceive it? And production, you could think about it if you're comparing it to writing, such as the penmanship, the handwriting, or the fonts, meaning if you have an amazing, genius piece of music and it's the tiniest illegible font, it can't be appreciated as easily because it's hidden beneath all that, for lack of a simpler word, occlusion. So you basically. That's a really cool analogy, Adrian. It is what it is. I didn't know how to bring it.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I never thought about it that way before.
Yeah.
And if any of those points, when a reviewer hits a file, and you have to understand it has to happen meticulously. It's not just arbitrary. If, for example, there's a significant composition issue and two production issues, I'm sorry, but we don't have the objective time to spell it all out. It has to get hard rejected. It doesn't, again, mean that there is a black and white line of good or bad. It's just that is how the library approaches that, where is the line drawn for the library's content. That's how the reviewers have to work. It's nonstop. Next. And otherwise, we have soft rejections, which is where, as many of you authors watching this are friends, that there is an opportunity for the track to be resubmitted. So the easiest, most straightforward soft rejection is when there's, actually I take that back because I'm starting at number 3. The harder of the soft rejections is the content issue, whereby it's the reviewer's discretion, and those are the terms of the library. That's what we all get when we signed up. We have to have a certain measure of authority in terms of what the library needs or wants. And in that sense, you can say that the buck kind of stops there. If a reviewer feels or determines objectively that a track has a clash or some dissonance or problem with phrasing or something that has to do with the structure of the composition or the arrangement or production itself, but it's not enough to be hard rejected, 1 or 2 points, we will accordingly grant the opportunity for it to be, resubmitted. That's what we want. We have to be able to decide what's too much and what's not enough. And number 3 is technical issues, which is the simpler aspects, which we see a lot of. Watermarks in the zip, no watermarks on the preview. Oops, we all get excited and carried away. And we have to give people the chance to fix that. That in a very small nutshell is the essence of hard rejection versus soft rejection.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to say over to the folks to chime in.
I was going to add, just from an author's perspective, handling hard versus soft rejection, because I've had both. And initially it's obviously frustrating because you spend time on this thing and then you're proud of it and someone tells you that it's not good enough. But kind of like going back to self-appraisal, you have to look at your work and take it as advice to improve it, because at the end of the day, they're just trying to improve your track so it does better and is good enough for this marketplace. So, for example, one of the things, I just had a soft rejection recently where they thought that the arrangement wasn't good enough. And so initially I was like, come on, like, what? And then I thought about it after, a half hour or so. I was like, that's actually true. So I just switched it up and then I uploaded, and then, it started selling better than some of my more recent uploads. So had I not gotten that feedback, perhaps it wouldn't have sold as well. So definitely taking some of that advice for soft rejection, for example, can be beneficial.
Yeah, I had the same thing like Yusu. I think that one time I also had some kind of composition that I really thought that it was really catchy, but then I had the need to maybe twist it a little bit to make it more communicate with the listener. After some fixing, it was a lot of it was nicer, I think. So it's the soft reject was correct for me, also.
And to add to hard rejections as well, I've had a couple of instances where couple of my tracks were hard rejected. First one was for some reason I had like very distorted bass on this song, and then I think that's why they rejected it. And then I just thought it was a coincidence. Did another track that had distorted bass. Maybe it's just the way I do distorted bass, but both of them got hard rejected, and you just have to take that as like, okay, I understand the marketplace better. Maybe that's just not something that's very well suited. So I just stopped doing distorted bass, at least for Audio Jungle. So taking that and understanding what's going to be viable for this marketplace is important information as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds to me, guys, like, at the end, the real emphasis here is that this is not an appraisal of the track's merit as a piece of art, but rather as a piece of a commercially viable file, right?
That's true. I would go even further as to say that it's not necessarily, we're not appraising the absolute commercial viability of a piece of work. It's not to say that we think this is not viable at all. You may very well have another sense of a better home for that track, or a better medium to a better vector, for lack of a simpler word again. But it's a matter of, we have to keep the library, in a sense, to meet the current Audio Jungle's customers' needs. And believe it or not, we did not set out to attract a certain type of customer with a certain type of music. It happened organically, whereby the vast majority of our customers have told us, through by their visits and coming back and choosing the type of music that they need for their projects.
Voting with their feet, essentially. They're voting with their feet.
Exactly, right. So you have that sense of, okay, well, if we make it harder for the vast majority of the customers to get what they want, then there isn't as much value in the library for them, and there isn't as much value, therefore, in the authors who who are present, who we're all working with together. So it's kind of a very symbiotic relationship whereby we're not setting out to say we want a specific type of music because that's the type of music that these are the types of customers. It's actually the customers who are saying this is the type of music we want. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And now we will move on to the next slide. Should I introduce each slide and give it a bit of a voice, like musical rejections, the nitty gritty. In this slide, Adrian Gardner discusses composition and arrangement and production.
I might be inclined to let Matthew Pablo talk about some specifics.
Matthew Pablo, over to you.
So music rejections. This could be hard for someone who doesn't really have much experience in, music. Let's say you're a new author, a new composer, just getting into music. But there is a standard that we have here, and some of the things that we look for music and composition and arrangement. I'm just going to go through the points here. General phrasing and spacing conflicts. Sometimes we hear a lot of stuff that's just the same one bar pattern over and over again, and obviously that's not really acceptable. So getting to know your phrasing is a really important thing. When it comes to composition, sorry, we're going to get really into music composition mode here.
I'm excited.
General phrasing is actually one of the harder things to get right as a composer. I mean, you can make these, great chord progressions and melodies and things like that, but phrasing it properly, that goes into melody theory, and melody is just something, that's one of the hardest things to learn and to improve on as a composer. And I'm sure all of us here are on the panel, we're all musicians, and you guys could agree with me that, general phrasing and melody, that's something we'll always be improving on, as we're growing as composers. That's something that we're always gonna have to work on improving, and we'll never really get there. It's just that's like kind of our life's work. And here it says instrumentals included. Good. Yeah. A lot of times you might see when we upload, I don't know, Yusu or Addy, have you guys uploaded any tracks with vocals before and seen any?
Yeah, I've done a bunch.
Of course.
Yes. So back to general commercial viability. If there's vocals, people don't have the software to remove vocals, and even in the industry, a track with hard vocals in the WAV format, you can't really just cut it out. It'll degrade the quality. So usually we'll, I don't know if you've seen this, we'll ask for a version without it. So it's a very good thing because that kind of adds to the viability for that. Intros, yeah. So I've seen a couple intros that go about from 30 seconds anywhere to a minute. It's just kind of gets to the point. After 30 seconds, commercial might be 30 seconds long. So that's gonna have to be fixed there. Go ahead, Adrian.
Yep, I just wanted to interject because excellent point. A lot of times you got to think back to the thinking like your customer's buyers. The customer is coming and searching for a piece of music. He gets the results he gets, and he's got to search for them. He play, pause, does this work, does this work? It's not like looking at pictures where you can scan them all quick and say, oh, that's what I like. You really, if you really want to capture your audience's, your customer's ear better, have as many tracks as you can, fulfill that need, whereby they're going to screen it from seconds. Think as a buyer. I'm not thinking as an author or as a reviewer or as anything else than a buyer right now, but I'm thinking about going through a track and does the beginning sound like, oh, this is something I'm interested in.
Hey, Adrian, are we able, I'd imagine that the average buyer would only listen to, take a stab here. How long does a buyer listen to the track before deciding to move on to the next one?
That is a very golden good question.
I have something to say about that. My experience in the industry is that, with media music, people that look for musicians or for music, to hire for contracts, not Audio Jungle, just in general. Usually they say the average time someone would take a look at someone's portfolio, they would listen to one track for about 15 to 20 seconds. So that's just from my experience. So it could be something around there. you know, you have a few seconds to, you know, make your point, you know, then that's kind
So
of the
don't
mentality. Yeah.
Don't bury the lead. Don't bury the lead. Make it there, right there at the front. Let it pop.
Yeah. Yeah, and you should get to the point in our time limit. I don't think people are gonna take 10 minutes.
But the best part of the track's coming up right now. Just wait, guys.
Adi.
I can say for myself, because I kind of love long intros with kind of some kind of atmospheres intro, but I think maybe I would put the long version of that track in the last track in the preview file, and try to make the shorter and the you know, the exact short intro in the first of all in the preview file. So if the buyer want to hear the full track, he would get into it very fast. No.
Well, that's true, because once you capture someone's attention, you can you've caught their attention, so then they can skip ahead and see, oh, where does this go? But if you don't grab their attention very early, they much more likely, we should say, in a probability sense, to move on.
Exactly.
So good stuff, good stuff. So coming to an end, unfortunately, sometimes people get excited about the tracks and the endings, which are also important in a sense, but are just, you want to keep the tracks really rounded out. You have the choice whether you can just either write what's called a button ending, where you have a proper track finishes, or what we do see, and to a degree we accept it, is tracks can fade, generally mute. Now, sometimes that doesn't work as well for all kinds of projects, but the fade out is okay. A lot of times where a rejection may occur is that one of the issues with the track, and again, keep in mind we have 3 issues to work with, is that the music stops suddenly. Like, you got a track, boom, boom, it happens, and then within 5 seconds, nothing happens, and the ending is cut off. So you got to take care of your endings too. The next point is solos and virtuosity. Virtuosity is very, very, I mean, there's a time and place for everything, but the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of music that's, you know, stock audio is going to be needed for supporting a visual. Now, if you're going to be supporting a visual, the visual is the primary focus of the viewer's attention. So if you're trying to deliver a message with a video, and you have all this fantastically, you know, elaborate solo work and virtuosic, you know, instrument playing on top, it prevents the viewer or the audience from focusing as much, and will more often than not lead the customer to be more likely to choose something else that is more subdued to support the video they're looking for. If it's taken to excess, again, it's nothing wrong with the music artistically, it's just not as much what the library is looking for.
That's a really interesting point, Adrian. And it's just actually something that I hadn't thought about myself, but the idea of, you've got a piece of work here that's fundamental purpose is to complement something else.
Yeah.
So to be the, you know, it's trying to emphasize or to drive attention to not itself, but to something else, which is really, really, really important. Whereas often I think people might be inclined to think of music as, you know, particularly from an artistic perspective, as a standalone piece of work, that the focus must be on the music rather than what it's actually showcasing.
Yep, and it's not a black and white. Care should be taken not to interpret it as a black and white, like no solos, no virtuosity. It's more so knowing how to balance it well, rather than having nonstop solo guitar lead, for example, or having a combination. When you combine some of these elements where they become less, what would the word be? Less ideal for, you know, visual support for a vaster amount of projects. Let's say you've got some general phrasing and you've got some structure and the flow is established, and then suddenly out of the blue, 30 seconds in, a guitar solo comes in. But picture that while you're playing that over a video, and all of a sudden you've got this visual, and then a guitar comes in. It detracts more, it just doesn't help you get as many
sales as you'd like.
Potential matches, we'll say. And same goes for repetition and variation. Music, it's been said, the soul of music is repetition. That's what creates the aesthetic, is repeating some themes, or having, some ideas that the listener's ear catches onto. But when you have a very short phrase that gets repeated nonstop, especially when it comes to percussion, it can destroy that aesthetic by making it too much. So you want to have some variation, but again, if you're only basing, let's call a spade, if people want to consider like the music itself, but then, I'm just going to throw a drum loop in there and just run it for 2 minutes, and the loop itself is 4 seconds and it doesn't change whatsoever, that's one of the major points that may lead to a rejection. And a lot of musicians know that, but a lot of newcomers may not realize it, because we do see a lot of submissions like this too. Sorry, I've been talking for a while, so please feel free to jump in if anyone has anything to say.
So what Matthew said, the key thing is that it's complementary. You have to kind of have that in mind. That's kind of what got me. That's kind of what I always think of doing media music, that it's definitely complementary to the visual counterpart. And to what Adrian was saying, with the solos and the repetition, and that everything's not black and white, it definitely is. There is like this weird middle ground where everything can come together. Your solos, your virtuosic solos and melodies and repetition can come together and work really well in a stock music track. And that's, I guess you could say, there is sort of an art form to stock music, because it's really up to you to use all these elements to make a good complementary music track for media.
And I think key to making anything that's complementary is about understanding and having an idea in your mind's eye as the kind of thing that you're going to be complementing. And
exactly.
So it's sort of like, in order to understand, what's going to sell for you, understand what kind of videos are popular on the internet, what kind of videos are people making right now, what genre of video is this particular track going to be used for? Sorry, I'm an expert now.
That's good.
I was going to add to, on a side note regarding endings, is just having sometimes a nice button ending is beneficial, in that you never know what the project length is going to be. So at any point, someone can just kind of split that ending and then put it wherever they want within your song. And if it's a convenient, nice ending, then you may have a higher chance of getting your track licensed because of that convenience factor. You may not have a super awesome artistic ending, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I just did a chord and I faded out. But I know that it's going to be more helpful in the chance that whatever video editor might be taking this and then applying it to wherever within my track.
Right on. All righty.
Right on. So we've got production issues.
Oh, sorry, I jumped too soon, Prem.
We're going to go through the production issues that are, I guess, by far and large, some of the things that we need people to understand as far as what reviewers may be listening for. Obviously, we've got sample quality, which is, a lot of music is sample-based. Not actually taking samples of other music. We don't want to do that, but actually... So do we use libraries or default samples? How does that play into the quality of your track? Well, a lot of default samples are not necessarily going to be the best. You can look at getting involved with improving your sample quality by looking at other libraries. If any of you guys have any thoughts or notions or recommendations in that sense, please feel free to speak up.
I'm sometimes finding, I'm using Logic most of the time, and I'm finding that the basic piano sound in Logic is very, very small, very thin sound, but sometimes it really fits to a huge playback, huge track. But if I want to make something that is more cinematic and more huge in the meaning of just a piano track, I usually won't go into Logic sound. I will look something for more bigger sound.
Mm-hmm. So that's where specifically the next point is looking at it. Sometimes less is more. You can take a sample that's relatively not as grandiose or as famous or the latest greatest, and
exactly,
you can actually make it sound better to suit the needs. It's really about, that's where the patience and persistence and the practice comes into play. So thank you for that. We've got live recording issues sometimes, which people sometimes feel are not as important, but they are important when there's excess recording noise, mic placement, artifacts, things that don't just fit in. It's one of the issues that can be called a production issue and lead to a rejection as well. Sounds and vocal effects brings us back to the point. We're trying to make it easier for the customers to use the track. A lot of projects may need voiceovers, so if you're going to have a piece of music and there's a lot of sound effects, I mean, everything has its place in the sense of balance, but you've got a lot of thunder and then wolves howling and eagles screaming. It's like we.
Sounds like I'm downloading that track.
Again, exactly. Matthew has. He is going to download that track to listen to it. But if you had a project and he wanted to sell soap, it would not work.
No. Unless it's soap.
Well, hang on. It depends on the soap. If it's really good stuff. The Eagles would be pretty fantastic, I think.
Right. But the bottom line is with sound effects, let the customer choose if they need sound effects or not. Because ultimately, if they want a sound effect, they can, obtain it and layer it however they want. But if they can't remove the sound effect from your track, they're going to look for another track. And that goes for a lot of vocals effects. Which by all means, you authors are free and welcome to include an instrumental version, which does not have those effects as much, to make it easier for the buyer. In many cases, the track may be perfect for that one buyer, but it's not going to help in the, again, we're looking at big picture. Otherwise, balancing levels, limiting compressions. We have two expert authors here. Maybe you guys would like to say something about how you approach some of the production side of things, so that you don't get rejections.
Oh yes.
I can definitely say that I'm always at a place where I'm trying to improve my mixes and my abilities as a mixing engineer and a recording engineer. So whenever I'm getting my monthly statement, I'll have a percentage that goes back into getting better plugins or better libraries, or I'll be watching videos like Pensado's Place or reading mixing books or mastering books, so that I'm always trying to improve my work and thus, improve my production quality for whatever ends up in Audio Jungle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Got to invest in yourself.
Yep. So we're good. No one has any further comments. Quantization, articulation. I can go on.
I can say about something that I hear a lot of composers, that the quantization, they're pressing the button of the quantization. It's going to be 100% quantization. I personally think that that if you want to give it more human feel, I use it Logic. I have some of kind of shortcut that automatically take me to 50% of quantization. So it's kind of give me the accurate I want in the notes, but it's kind of it's making the music more human. So the same is about the modulation wheel, because a lot of musicians that doesn't know that the modulation wheel on the keyboard is really changing the violins and the strings sound, so you can express yourself. A lot of the expression is coming from the modulation wheel. So I really recommend it, trying to use a lot of modulation will.
Yeah, I'll definitely add to that. I do the same thing with like drums, where I'll play the drums, and most of the time it's really bad because I'm using my fingers, and then I'll quantize about 80%. So it still feels like live drums, but not a terrible drummer. And then also, like, I play strings, so as a string player, the modulation wheel is definitely the most realistic way in terms of how I would be by using vibrato or dynamics and etc. So
Exactly.
To
Yep.
add to what they're saying, yeah, and these are things, what they're saying, fixing the, setting the quantization levels, and doing the mod wheel. This is stuff that you should probably look at after you record or put it in there, because otherwise, I mean, I think I've heard it a couple times where I think, they literally just play on the MIDI keyboard and then, okay, it's done. You need to spend some time afterwards making sure it fits, and it goes with that patience and practice. I mean, you'll get used to doing that with these, because every sound library and every digital audio workstations, they're all different.
Mhm.
Bottom line, these are things that you should be looking at after the fact too. Part of that editing and proofing process, like proofreading.
Yeah. Excuse me. I guess I'd just add that everything has its place to a degree. Like quantization is more important in certain types of music, electronic music. And just to understand where it fits, there's lots of information out there. If anybody's interested in looking it up, you can get a lot of knowledge and bring that into the tracks that you're producing. The last point quickly is about velocities. I'll just take that one and say that for what it's worth, people need to quickly learn. We do see a lot of submissions where every single note in a piano track is played at the very same level. This was fine many years ago for video games. I'm guilty of that myself. I'm the first to admit. But by today's standards, we simply can't accept tracks like that's one of the bigger red flags that will lead to one of the points that may require a hard rejection. So keep in mind that you want to humanize your music. You want to have your tracks not simply just piano, but any kind of instrument where it's a virtual instrument. Take care to make each note have its respective balance or volume, which is technically known as velocity. Matt, you can switch the slide.
Rock and roll. At the middle of the road.
Yes, we're at the middle of the road. Well, hopefully we'll get to the end soon enough. The middle of the road has to do with the quality of the. Now consider that you receive, imagine that as not an author, but put yourself in somebody else to listen to other authors' tracks all day, every day, and a lot of those tracks are going to be in between. Are they good enough? Are they not good enough? Are the issues compounded to, warrant a rejection? So this is one of the important topics that has been discussed in the past in the forums, and it's a reality, and we felt it was important to discuss it briefly. So it's inevitably when we receive tracks that are right down in the middle of the road, we need to make a decision. There's no right way to decide sometimes if it's good enough or bad enough. We just have to make the best objective decision we can based on what we're hearing with the amount of time we have. So for any individuals who, take this as an opportunity to experience what a lot of people call inconsistency in reviewing on our side, the vast majority of the time it's because of that. We have something called, and it's a natural phenomenon, it's an exposure bias, whereby, for those who are not aware, it's very simply, if you listen to a more music of a higher caliber initially, and your ear becomes attuned to that, if you receive a track that's more middle of the road, you're more inclined to feel or conclude that it's going to not make the cut. Vice versa, if you've been subjected to a number of tracks which are significantly, objectively inferior, which you can quickly determine that they can't be accepted, soon enough a track that's the middle of the road may lead you to feel and conclude that it's acceptable. Well, which one was the right decision. There is an opportunity for all musicians to improve in that sense, where a track that is the middle of the road that ends up rejected. And musicians just genuinely have to ask themselves, is that the level where they feel that they want their tracks to end up, or is there an opportunity to get to the point where a track you submit is never going to be in the middle of the road? Because in the middle of the road, you have a bigger chance of getting run over. You want to be like on the right side of the road. So that's where, you know, every musician, author, and again, it comes down to the standards, the requirements, or the needs of the library. Not to say that there's an entire musical universe out there, and Audio Jungle is not the end of the musical universe. But in this library, anyone who submits to this library needs to understand, is the work that they're sending borderline or running the risk of being deemed as such when it's getting reviewed. And so it's just taking the time to look at one's own work and seeing what the strengths and the weaknesses are. And if you're going to improve, look at the weaknesses. Don't bask in the strengths, because you're already good at that. So anybody else have anything to say?
It sounds to me like, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's reviewers are human beings. Although Matthew Pablo is borderline, he could be a no, I'm kidding. It's not real. Yeah, reviewers are human beings, and they're subject to the same biases, and you know, and I suppose you know, that depending on, yeah, it's sort of like, if, you know, I drink a lot of wine. Sometimes, you know, I'll drink a lot of really, really good wine, and then I'll have a mediocre wine, and then I'll be like, oh, this wine's terrible. Sometimes I'll have a lot of really, really, really bad wine, and then I'll have an okay wine, and I'll be like, well, I'm too drunk to recognize. No, I'm kidding. And I'll have the wine. I'll be like, well, I'll have a mediocre wine, and I'll think, okay, this is really good. So I guess it's all, yeah. And they're experiencing so many tracks so often that it's ultimately going to, you know, that there will be a little bit of that comes in there as well. So how do you keep safe at the end of the day? Make your track really, really, really exciting.
Yeah.
That's probably a terrible wine analogy. Okay, we'll move on.
Quite happy.
Sounds like you have a problem, to be honest, actually.
You know, I can quit if I want to. I'm in charge of my life. Let's talk about sound.
That is the quote of the webinar. I'm going to say it. That's like, you have a problem.
Well,
let's talk about sounds. Yes, let's talk about sounds. We did not want to forego the important aspects that our dear sound authors who are interested in minimizing their rejections as well. We've heard over the months and years, we know that there have been some frustrations. We know that it's a nebulous world out there. So basically, just to run through the points in a way that explains the gist of it, why do most sounds get rejected on Audio Jungle? Again, without going into the very nitty-gritty, Audio Jungle prefers sounds that are ready to use, in the sense that they don't need a lot of excess editing. So if your sounds are just like a microphone that you've gone and just recorded in the street for, I don't know, 5-6 minutes, and you submit that, chances are that's not what the library is looking for. There may be a use for it. Somebody may want to put in the time to cut up everything and create it, but that's not how sounds work here. So if sounds are not quite ready to use, or if there's a poor recording quality where there's coughing or in the background, or all kinds of sounds that don't belong there, generally that is a very strong indicator that it's going to not be accepted. And just to talk about similarity to existing work, it's very important to understand that a sound will not be rejected specifically because it's too similar to a lot of the stuff we already have in the library. This used to be the case. I can tell you right now that right now we are not working that way. Where you may find some resistance in getting accepted is if an individual finds themselves submitting several sounds which are submitted, which basically are practically identical. We've seen submissions, for example, and this is not to fault anyone, it's just people are uploading, right? So If you take a penny and drop it 50 times or 100 times and record each penny drop and submit each file separately, we're going to say no, because your portfolio is not going to have 100 penny drop sounds. Sorry if you're watching. To the person who did that. And a big tip is that, like, just before we go move on to the next point, we have a lot of this information in our help center. We wanted to take the opportunity to speak to everyone, but the fact of the matter is we have a lot of this written down, so feel free to go through the help center. It's a lot more organized than it was in years past, and you can find this stuff there. Factors that help getting sounds accepted, basically helping the user make no effort. They hear a sound effect, they drag it in, it's ready to go, they pop it in their game, they don't have to do much. It's called drag and drop. So to exemplify that, you want to have the edges of your sound well trimmed, not a lot of excess silence. You don't have a finger snap with 10 seconds of silence. That doesn't help. The library doesn't prefer those sounds. Consistent field recordings would mean that if you're going to have a longer field recording, let's say of sounds in a park, it should stay consistent throughout. You don't want to have the sound in the park end up somebody getting into their car, driving with car sounds and going to the shopping mall and saying, that's my, it's not consistent. Also, identifiable speech. Help your customers using, let's say, a coffee ambience. Okay, you want to hear the sounds of coffee, the sounds of the crowd, the sounds of the environment. But as soon as you hear identifiable speech in any language where you're talking about their brother's cousin's operation or things like that that happened on Monday, the customer is not going to be able to use that in their project. And again, those are types of examples where you want to be mindful. So randomness and artifacts sums it all up in that sense. Those are issues that can get, you know, you want to avoid those issues in order to help your sounds get accepted. And you want to minimize the edits, basically. For sounds, you can take care to watch your watermark volumes and the watermark frequencies, which don't have to be as spread out the same way as music. And you just want to keep your files separated in the zip, and you'll have a lot less rejections in the long run.
Lovely. Okay, moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Getting is just the beginning.
Who made that?
You'll never do another webinar with me again. It's okay.
Matthew, okay.
I think he already had his AM wine. That's why.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm 3 glasses deep already.
I guess we're winding down. Did anybody have any thoughts or comments so far? No? Okay. So where are we? We are talking about just, I guess, some habits to avoid rejections. These are very, I would say, simple, but habits that you would like to do mindfully. Always listen to your tracks before you submit them again. Fully, it helps. Do it with fresh ears. That helps a lot. A lot of musicians will know that when you play that track again after you've had a break of a day or so, or you've slept on it, you hear it differently. And then you're like, wait, this is not, I didn't catch this before. And you have an opportunity to fix it again for yourself. You want to do system tests on different types. Like a lot of customers may not be listening with the same headphone or sound equipment that you have while you're producing it. So test it on different speakers, test it on your laptop speakers. People, you know, is it going to distort on a laptop speaker? You want to be able to identify some of those things to make it sound as good as it can on as many systems as you can. A very, very important thing, which actually is one of the things that reviewers do from time to time when we need to help make a decision that's neither here nor there. Use time lapses or use a video, because again, the most important thing that we've said, music is supportive to the visual. So for example, you've got a track try it out. Go find a video on YouTube, for example, that I'm just saying time lapses because they work especially well for this task. Go find a video, mute it, play your music over it, and see how it goes. And if you really get that feeling where the music merges with the video and they become like a final project, try another video, And then you get the sense that a lot of customers would be finding your music to be a good fit. Or if you start seeing that there are some clashes, you might need to work on it. Otherwise, you want to avoid bias on your own side in order to prevent bias on the library side, if that makes any sense. So ask around. Ask people who, you can get some really objective feedback. People who are not afraid to hurt your feelings, if that's what it comes to. People who give you the telling it like it is, which is one of the values that Envato goes by. Not everyone who's going to say, oh, your track is the best, your track is amazing, gets every single level of art has something that can be critiqued. So you want to take that and get to the point of what is left for me to improve. And a lot of times there's a lot to improve, even when we accept it, and everybody knows that. The fact is, pacing your uploads is going to help a lot of newcomers, if newcomers are watching. We have seen our fair share of very enthusiastic new members upload practically a very important part of their portfolio without fully getting everything right. And that means that a lot of stuff gets rejected. Whereas if you're pacing your uploads initially as a newcomer, you can get a sense of where the mistakes you're making without wasting as much time. And for anyone who's established, for those of you who may not have considered it, pacing your uploads also allows the queue to feel like it's not as long, because if you upload something every few days, then you may have something processed every few days. It's not waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, drawing the line. As much as reviewers have to draw the line with whether they accept it or not, in the event that something gets rejected, it's nothing personal. It's not that we don't like the music. It's that the music ultimately doesn't fit the needs of the library. So as an author, when you read a rejection note, you have to make a decision. Am I going to try to rework this into a new track that is acceptable, or am I going to draw the line? And if you draw the line, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. And when you draw the line, you make the decision, I'm stopping here and I'm going to work on a new project rather than keep working on a project. And this can happen especially where there are, successive rejections. So think about when is it time to, start from scratch or start something new.
Good. Alrighty, home stretch.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Oh, wow, okay. We're on to the questions. Woo!
Awesome.
Oh, but before the questions, I wasn't sure if anybody had anything to add, but if we want to have the questions come up, we can have any questions.
Yeah. Alrighty, guys. Let's, if everyone throws their questions down into the question box, I can do them as we go. Let's have a look. This is a really good question, I think, to sort of throw out there, and it's one that I actually deal with quite a bit in my role as a lead program manager. I guess my track, Just Corporate, on Tuesday became the featured item. How does the Envato team choose these tracks, and does the number of old rejects affect the new downloads?
Can you repeat the second part of that? I didn't catch that.
So the question is about featured items and how they're chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is whether or not old rejections actually impact on download ratings. So as in, like, just because someone has been rejected, rejected many times, does that mean that their item is going to be downloaded less?
Can you clarify, when you say downloaded less, you mean like they're accepted, or?
Yeah, they're accepted because something has a person's tracks have been rejected more. I'm assuming the question is, does that mean that that a person's rejection rating, does that impact their ability to get in the future?
No.
Not at
No,
all.
basically, regarding featured files, no, it has absolutely nothing to do. The two, without going into the inner workings of, it's quite cross-departmental in that sense. But the answer to the question, does the rejection ratio as determined by the review queue, accepted versus rejected, have any bearing on if a track is going to be featured from a portfolio? No, it doesn't. I mean, they may be related in the sense that if an account has a lot of rejections and that they're a newcomer and they're looking and they manage to get a few tracks on board, it may not initially be flagged as a track that can get featured, but it has. If a track suddenly comes along and the account comes, I mean, if we look on the forums or in the help center, there's a bit of information that explains what the general sense of featuring items, how that comes about. It has nothing to do with the approval ratio or the rejection ratio. It doesn't.
Cool. We have a question here, a couple of questions about volumes. Is there a standard decibel output level for the submissions?
How about Matthew? You can answer that.
That goes into the production quality. There is a general production quality, and it's just kind of common sense. If it goes over 0 dB and distorts, obviously we're going to either have to say no or ask you to fix it. And if it's way too quiet, -22 or something, we're going to ask you to normalize it to an acceptable level. So normalizing your tracks to under 0 dB is ideal. But I mean, if you have an orchestral piece that has more dynamic contrast, maybe you have, generally there's more headroom to work with, is generally acceptable, but it's part of the production quality standard.
That's good. I'm just flipping through some questions to see if I can get a common vibe. And while we're, Adrian, you can always play us a ukulele.
Only for you, not.
Mm-hmm. Let's have a look. I guess one of the questions that was asked was around the featured items. I think I can probably speak to that a little bit more. Featured items are only, I think it's actually a misconception that the featured items are exclusively chosen by the quality team, which isn't 100% correct. The featured items are actually chosen in part by the quality team. The quality team flags items that they think are particularly good, but they also, the marketing team actually plays a really, really, really big role in the selection of the featured items and what they're going to be. And they're based on, like, obviously things that are within the author's control, but also things that are outside the author's control. With the featured items, things that are inside the author's control are obviously things like the quality of the item, what's doing really, really, really well at any particular point in time. And so as an author, one of the big pieces of advice I'm told to give, one of the big pieces of advice I'm told to give authors is, have a look at the featured items that are currently doing really well and get an idea as to what those featured items are and kind of the gist of them, if that makes any sense, the way in which they're constructed, and think about how you might be able to create something that fits into that line. The other things that they're often selected based upon is, and I think Adrian and the gang here have talked a bit about this today, which is the direction the market is moving. People are voting with their feet, and what they want to do with featured items is make it quite easy for people to find really, really, really hard quality tracks that suit the kind of in-demand category, if that makes any sense. Is there a commercial standard for arrangement and song length? Is the next question.
Is there a commercial standard
for arrangement and song length?
I would, is there an actual commercial standard in the industry or for the library? I can't speak to the industry because we can only speak about the library here as far as we're looking for. I would say that there is a general sense that buyers are looking for tracks that are not excessively long, and somewhere there's a sweet spot, which you can tell by looking at what customers are inherently going for at the end of the day. There isn't a fixed number that we can give. It's
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
It's a diverse market and it's a diverse industry. There are many needs for many types of media. I would just say, if you were looking to figure out, what the industry standard is, I mean, look at them. Just do some research on what media output you're looking for. I mean, if you're looking for video games, you can have video tracks that range up to 5 minutes or longer, background music. Or if you're looking at commercials, you might find that there is a standard in the industry. Well, commercials, I mean, like advertisements. There's a standard for those too. So I would say, find the media output you're looking for, and do some research, and then you'll find sort of the standard of what media output you're trying to make music for.
Here's a question that's awesome. Here's a question for the authors and is labeled specifically. The question is, how do you decide when your track is complete? How do you balance quality with quantity?
I can start. So I usually have kind of like a standard A-B, maybe arrangement, and then if from there I feel pretty happy about it, then I'll call it a day and say that that's going to be what my song will be. And it's tricky because that sort of extends into the whole creative process of you have to draw the line somewhere and decide that your piece of work is done. So for me, it's going to be like, I'm going to spend a certain number of hours on this song, and if it's at a point that I feel that I'm really happy with it, then I'm going to go ahead and submit it. And maybe there will be other times where it's not quite where I want it to be, then I'll just kind of put it on the back burner, work on another song, and then come back to it. But yeah, I don't know how to directly answer that question, other than that, you reach a certain point where you feel like it's good enough and you're happy with it, and you just have to draw the line and saying that that's good enough to submit to whatever you're going to be submitting to.
What about you, Addy?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of thinking the same like you. So it's really hard to say if it's white or black. But a lot of time when I'm starting to compose something, I try to imagine how it will be in the end of the process. And sometimes I get into it really fast, and after 1 hour I have the same feeling like I imagined it. And so if I'm feeling that it's the same thing, I think I'm done with the track. If not, I'm giving it a half an hour. I'm taking a break, and then I go back into it and trying to fix the things that need some fixing.
Yeah, that's very good. Alrighty, guys. Well, I reckon that's pretty solid. I'm pretty happy with where we've gotten today, and yeah, I think now we're going to have a magical performance by Adrian Gardner. Who wants it? Come on, let's put a show of hands.
Yeah.
Let's force him to do it.
I like Matthew's keyboard behind him.
No keyboard here. Oh, keyboard.
Thank you for the invitation, Matthew.
Are we about to get it? Is this happening, or are you just gonna stand there and decline?
I will respectfully decline.
Alrighty, guys. That's it. Thanks everybody for joining us today. It's always awesome that we get such an amazing turnout for these webinars, and it really helps us do more and more. Yeah, a lot of people are saying more webinars in the future, so please keep coming along. And when you do get a chance, please stay, and if you ever have any interaction with members of the panel, please just shoot them a message and say thank them, and please thank them. The preference would be to do that on, say, the forums, because then everyone can see you. We will be uploading a video recording of this webinar soon, so it can stand the test of time on the YouTubes, and people can go back and refer to the sections that they think they might need more of. a marketing webinar would be great. Lots of thank yous from people here in the webinar. So until next time, thanks very much for joining us. And thanks again to our amazing panel and to Adrian Gardner.
And thank you, Matthew, and Yusu, and Adi, and everyone.
And Adi.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks,
so
guys.
much.
Until then.
Morning.
Have a great week. Morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. It's way too early. I'm going to have my morning wine. Ta-ta.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.